What's up, Guardians, and welcome back, Titans. School's back in session today as we dive into the Prismatic subclass, where we'll be checking out the best build to solo any dungeon right now. A few days ago, we looked into the best Prismatic Warlock build to solo dungeons, so I figured it would be appropriate to do the same for Titans. If you missed out on that Prismatic Warlock video, you can get the link for it down in the description. It can be a pretty stressful challenge to solo a dungeon. You need to have equal parts damage and survival, with a dash of patience, unless you're some ungodly player. So you need a build that's going to regenerate health quickly, amplify your ability regeneration, and boost your damage. And that's exactly what today's build is going to do for us, giving us the power to overcome any enemy onslaught and annihilate those dungeon bosses. Today's build features the Synthoceps Exotic Gauntlets, which is not a new exotic by any means, but it's an extremely reliable one and a very easy to use one. Every single dungeon in Destiny is filled with a litter of rank and file enemies that continuously spawn in, even during damage phases, and the Synthoceps will give us a huge bonus to our melee and super damage whenever those enemies are close by. Now, Prismatic subclasses do offer exotic class items, and the Spirit of the Synthos can be one of the two available traits. But there's some extreme differences in how this exotic functions compared to how its spirit does. As a side note, I haven't felt all that comfortable pushing builds that solely rely on exotic class items, mainly because of their low drop rates, plus the fact that there's no lockout on what drops you do get. And there's 64 total combinations, which would mean a lot less Guardians would actually be able to replicate a build that focuses on any particular exotic class item. The Spirit of the Synthos provides a 165% increase to melee damage when biotic enhancements are active. But that's it. The actual exotic, on the other hand, provides that same 165% increase in melee damage, but it adds on a 50% increase in super damage, plus increased weapon handling and reload speed. We'll have 3 different types of melee attacks with this build, and we're going to have Transcendency, which allows us to continuously spam our abilities, which means that the Synthoceps will be working overtime. The only exotic class item alternative that I would recommend using would be Heart of Inmost Light, along with the Star Eater Scale. This way you would get bonus ability regeneration plus a bonus in super damage, but you would miss out on the bonus melee damage, and that would be a major deficit towards our ultimate goal. The Synthoceps are an agnostic exotic, meaning that they will work with any subclass. We are focusing around their use with the Prismatic subclass, but you will find that Solar and Strain subclasses offer some great synergy with this build right now, and a lot of that has to do with the new Hunter's Journal artifact. Since every dungeon encounter is a little different, you might end up finding Solar or Strand to be a better option under certain situations. For that reason, we will cover the best Solar and Strand setups to use with the Synthoceps right now. But before we get to that, let's talk about what the Synthoceps are going to do for us on a Prismatic build. And the starting point is that Transcendency, because that makes such a difference. The quicker we can charge that up, the quicker we'll get to spam overpowered abilities. And while we're Transcendent, we'll have a combination grenade that's made of Strand and Arc energies. This is going to suspend and jolt enemies, and once we've got them in the air, they're going to be easy targets for overpowered melee abilities. And with how we've set up this class tree, we'll be able to recharge that Transcendency pretty damn fast. And we start with our aspects, where we're using Knockout and Consecration. Consecration gives us that triumphant solar slam that scorches and ignites enemies. And because we have paired this with the Frenzied Blade melee option, we'll have up to 3 consecutive consecrations that we can perform. With the addition of the Solar Fulmination artifact mod, our ignitions will deal bonus damage to larger areas. Not only will this increase the effectiveness of our consecration slams, but it'll improve any other forms of ignitions that we could trigger, whether that's through another ability or through a weapon. Knockout will give us bonus melee damage. It grants us with the amplified buff and gives us health regeneration after breaking an opponent's shield, or critically wounding an enemy with our charged or uncharged melee. Rank and file enemies will provide 50 points of health, but larger enemies will provide as much as 100. When Knockout is active, our uncharged melee will have a 100% increase in damage, and it'll count as an arc powered melee. Our actual powered melees, which would be our Consecrations and Frenzied Blades, will receive a 50% increase thanks to Knockout, and these damage increases will stack on top of biotic enhancements. Since Knockout and Frenzied Blades will give us two separate melee options, I would suggest to go into your controller settings and make a separate binding for charged and uncharged melees. Otherwise, you might end up using a Frenzied Blade whenever you are saving it for a Consecration. When Knockout makes us amplified, we'll have increased movement speed and increased reload speed. We'll also have a 15% damage resistance bonus whenever we're sprinting. And since we are using the Galvanic Armor Artifact mod, whenever we are amplified, we'll become 30% more resistant to incoming damage. So when we're amplified and running, we'll be getting a 45% damage resistance bonus, which is going to stack on top of any other resistance bonuses that we get. Our choice in grenades and super will vary based on the encounter that we're in, and our choice in super will have a direct impact on our survival because we are using the Facet of Purpose fragment. This is going to grant us an elemental buff that matches our super, and that's going to happen every time we collect an orb. I love the Twilight Arsenal option because it weakens enemies, and it does do a good amount of damage, and it's going to be able to give us an overshield whenever we collect orbs. But sometimes the super's axes hit each other instead of hitting enemies, and that really makes for crappy damage phases. The Glacial Quake super is great for ad clear purposes, and if we could create stasis shards, we'd have bonus melee energy, but Frost Armor still kinda sucks, so I'd rather take Woven Mail between the two. Thunder Crash will make for a great damage super against most any boss, but we're already getting amplified, which leaves Hammer of Soul, which would benefit from Solar Fulmination, and it would give us restoration whenever collecting orbs. Between all of the options, I find Twilight Arsenal and Hammer of Soul to be the best to use on a survival standpoint. And with survival at mind, we are using Facet of Protection, and this is going to give us an additional 15% damage resistance whenever we are surrounded by enemies. And when we are Transcendent, we'll gain an even bigger damage resistance bonus, bumping us up to 32%. And that doesn't account for Galvanic Armor and any of the other damage resistance bonuses. We are using the Facet of Courage fragment, which means our light energy attacks will deal 10% bonus damage against enemies who are under the effects of darkness debuffs, and this includes enemies who are severed, unraveled, suspended, chilled, and frozen. Our Frenzied Blades and Transcendent Grenade have already got that covered. We could also choose to have a Shackle Grenade or a Glacier Grenade. I find Shackle Grenades to be much more streamlined. They don't ever really cause you to have to slow down like a big wall of ice would. But we are using Facet of Ruin, and that does increase the radius of ignitions and the damage that shattering crystals cause. So those big walls of ice will make for a great complement to the Consecration Slams, helping us deal even more damage. The final fragment that we've chosen is Facet of Balance, and this is going to give us a 10% bonus in melee energy whenever we defeat enemies with light-based energies, and it's going to give us 10% grenade energy whenever we defeat them with darkness energies. With us having a complete mixture of light and dark-based abilities, this will really improve their uptime. And by using a mixture of light and dark weapons, we can improve that ability regeneration even more. And that's going to help us recharge that Transcendency buff even faster. We've mentioned a few artifact mods already, but let's go ahead and talk about the rest. We're using the Elemental Siphon mod, and this is going to create elemental pickups, which match our super type. These will be created when rapidly defeating enemies with kinetic weapons, or weapons that match our super. Void Breaches will give us bonus class ability energy. Fire Sprites will give us bonus grenade energy. Stasis Shards will grant melee energy, which is a shame because that Frost Armor sucks. Since Ionic Traces do provide energy to all three abilities, it does give us a compelling reason to use Thunder Crash. But as I mentioned before, it really just depends on which encounter you're in. We're also using the Radiant Orbs mod, so whenever we collect an orb, we'll gain Radiance, and that's going to give our weapons a 20% increase in damage, plus the ability to pierce shields. We've got Shield Crush active, so whenever we are amplified and have Radiance, we're going to get a 25% increase to the regeneration rate of our grenades, and a 25% bonus in grenade damage. We've also got that same deal going to our melee, whenever we have Woven Mail, Frost Armor, or an Overshield active. And that's a big tipping point towards why I find Twilight Arsenal to be the best super option, and why Synthoceps is the best exotic option, because all these damage bonuses are getting extrapolated by biotic enhancements. Transference is another great artifact mod that's going to give us an extra 10% bonus damage to both our melee and grenade abilities whenever we're transcendent. At a certain point, there's a depreciation value that's applied to these damage bonuses, but we have so many getting triggered to increase not only our melee damage, but all of our damage in so many different ways. So no matter what enemy we're facing, we're going to be able to completely annihilate it. There's a few other artifact mods that would be really beneficial to us, like Void Hegemony, Expanding Abyss, or even Blade Stamina. But I find the benefits of the other artifact mods to be of higher priority, and sadly we just can't equip all of these different artifact mods at the same time. Whenever we use the Synthos on a Strand or Solar build, some of these artifact mods wouldn't be necessary, and when we use this on a Solar build, we will continue to use Consecration, but we'll also have Soul Invictus, which gives us a continued source of health restoration. It scorches enemies who pass through it, and while standing in it, it'll extend our hammer's super. With fragments like Ember of Ashes, we'll deal extra scorch damage, and with Searing, we'll be able to recharge our Consecration slams even faster. Ember of Torches will give us that Radiance, and Ember of Empyrean will prolong the effects of Radiance and Restoration. Whenever using the Synthoceps on a Strand build, we'll have the benefits of Banner of War, giving us a huge boost to our survival with a constant source of health regeneration, Woven Mail, and bonus melee damage. With Thread of Generation and Thread of Fury, we'll be able to regenerate our grapple melee and frenzied blades much faster, and between Thread of Warding and Into the Fray, we'll be able to keep Woven Mail active for as long as we're engaged in combat. Like I said before, there are some encounters that Solar and Strand have a clear advantage, but most of the time you'll have smooth sailing whenever using the Synthoceps on Prismatic. Now, when it comes to our choice in weapon loadouts, there's a few standouts that you'll want to consider using. The Monte Carlo is great at regenerating melee energy, but it's otherwise kinda weak. The Dragon's Breath is a great source of easy damage that's going to get amplified because of Solar Fulmination. Since we've got an increase to glaive damage, the Vex Caliber would make a great option since it provides a void overshield whenever blocking. And keep in mind that because of Shield Crush, that overshield is going to give us bonus melee regen. Since a lot of encounters have an abundance of arc damage, the Risk Runner or Ergo Sum would give you an added level of damage resistance, and the Navigator would give us Woven Mail while also severing enemies. But the Buried Bloodline is the one exotic that I would recommend over all the others. This weakens enemies, and it grants us with Devour. While Devour is active, Final Blows grant full health restoration and bonus grenade energy. The bonus grenade energy is great, but the consistent source of bonus health regeneration is going to be substantial. When it comes to legendary weapons, Slice, Chill Clip, and Headstone will be great options to feed back into our class tree choices. But Heal Clip is going to provide almost as much benefit as Devour would. Reloading after a Final Blow grants a 2-stack of Cure, which is an invaluable advantage to have. And it's a great trait to have on weapons like the Aberrant Action, the Luna's Howl, or the Abyss Defiant. Pugilist would also be a great legendary weapon trait, since it helps regenerate our melee energy. With this build focusing heavily around melee use, shotguns are always welcome, especially those with Trench Barrel or 1-2 punch. Now, when it comes to our choice in armor, the main character stats to focus on will be Resilience. This reduces incoming damage, but it maxes out at 30%. It would also be wise to focus towards Recovery, to be able to increase how quickly our health begins to regenerate. Otherwise, strength would be the next big stat to focus on. This way we have the minimum cooldown time on our Frenzied Blade. When it comes to our armor mods, we've got a few things going on to help us generate extra orbs and extra ability energy. We've got Siphon Helmet mods, Heavy Handed, and Reaper class item mods, which will create orbs aplenty. This way we can maintain radiance and have those elemental buffs. And by using the Recuperation Boots mod, we'll have a secondary source of health regeneration. Hands On is a great helmet mod to be able to get super energy back quickly. But because of the ammo economy when running solo, we are using Heavy Ammo Finder instead. We've invested heavily towards survival and melee damage with this build. We could dip even further into our melee abilities with the use of a melee kickstart, but I don't think that's necessary, and I think it would be better to go into a different direction. We have Radiance to give our weapons a damage bonus, but by adding in weapon surge mods, we'd be able to cut through those dungeon bosses even faster. And with 2 weapon surge mods active, we'd have a 17% bonus in damage, which is going to get stacked right alongside Radiance. So there's your weapon damage, your ability regeneration, and your health restoration. Exotic class items might be all the rage right now, but if you want a build that you can rely on to solo flawless dungeons as a Titan, then there's no better build than the Synthoceps, and there's no better subclass than Prismatic. With that said, I wish you all the best of luck in soloing whichever dungeon you're after. If you need a little extra juice to get you through those long nights of grinding away, then be sure to check out the amazing selection of supplement drinks at Advanced GG, and you'll get a discount on those whenever using my promo code, and you can find that down in the description. Let me know how those late night dungeon runs are going down in the comments, and what your thoughts of the Synthoceps and the Prismatic Titan are. If you need help making a copy of today's build, you can find a link to all 3 variations down in the description. Thank you as always for checking out the video. If you enjoyed and found it helpful, then be sure to hit that like button below, along with the subscribe button if you're new. Both are greatly appreciated, and both really do help support the channel. And until next time, Guardians, this has been Profane, wishing you all some happy hunting.